Thank you, Mr. Day. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, and thank you for calling me at the beginning. I agree with what the Speaker, the mover of the motion, has said so powerfully in her opening remarks, and thank you so much to the Honourable, where are my notes? My Honourable Member for Motherwell and Wishaw for bringing this debate, and others have made important points about the importance of post offices to local communities and town centres, and this is what I want to focus on. So in my constituency, after the tsunami of loss of post offices and post office counters following 2011, since 2017, from the 10 post office counters we had, no Crown Post Office, but from the 10 we had, we lost 3 in the last 3 years. But the one that's most important is the one that served Brentford High Street, a community that's doubled in the last 10 years and is now roughly 10 to 15,000 households. The post office counter was in a shop in the middle of the town centre where many buses pass. It served a very large population and a very large number of small businesses. And because the building and the parade that it was situated in was due to be redeveloped, and in fact has now subsequently been demolished, there was a 1-year notice period where we all knew that that building would have to be emptied out, and therefore the post office would no longer be able to remain in that premises. Now, and then it so happened that the post office, the postmaster, decided that he didn't want to carry on the business, and that in itself is an issue. Now, the good news is that 18 months after that post office counter closed and we had no service in the whole of Brentford at all, we are going to get a new counter at Cost Cutters on the High Street. But that means we've had, and that's in a couple of months, so we'll have had 18 months with no service, a service that so many feel is vital. Now, we could have avoided that gap. The post office knew that there would be the need to find a new premises and probably a new postmaster. So did the local authority, so did I as the MP, so did local councillors. Now, the post office sought applications. The first round, there were only 2 applicants from all the many businesses and organisations in Brentford that could have opened a counter. But there were only 2, and neither of them fitted the criteria. I think there was another application round, and I'm not sure whether Cost Cutter tipped over the bar in this round and was accepted, or whether there was even a 3rd round. Why are postmasters, why are people not applying for or not retaining counters? And the Honourable Member and others have already mentioned this. The margins are so slim, the pay is too low. The requirements to cover the post office counter by only a qualified person makes it very restrictive in terms of leave, sickness and so on. I don't know what's been mentioned. The increase in robberies and violence makes those sort of retail businesses quite physically risky anyway. And, of course, the Horizon project has damaged the reputational risk of the post office. And what is the post office doing about this? Because I understand that the post office has an element of a public service duty as a fully owned, government-owned company, which we all see provides essential public services. Now, in my correspondence and my meetings with the post office, frankly, I found it very, very passive. I can get no coherent response from either the post office or from the former minister. I've not had a chance to speak to the current minister about this. But it feels like, the responses I do get, it feels like the role is one of, from the post office organisation, is passive. A post office representative told me yesterday that if no one applies, then what can we do about it? You know, that doesn't seem to me like a proactive response from an important government-overseen operation. Now, there is the post office access criteria, which talks about 90% of people living within 3 miles of a post office and 99% of the UK population within 3 miles of their nearest post office or outlet, 95% of the total urban population across the UK to be within 1 mile of the nearest post office. But frankly, that doesn't make a lot of sense if your community or the place you can get to by the buses doesn't have a post office. In Brentford, we have a post office just over a mile away, But you can't get there by bus, and there's nowhere to park anywhere near it either. It's a tiny little shop. We should have one in Brentford town centre, and the post office should recognise it. Now, I've now been told that the post office realises that Brentford is a priority and should have a main post office. But why didn't they think it was a priority 2 years ago when we knew that this was going to be an issue? So my ask of the Minister and for the Post Office is to work together to address what I see as a public sector duty to deliver a core service in all town centres, and you could define that. We could use the plan also for transport access. We could use public transport access. We could use what planning uses, the PTAL grading, which is the enables you to define the criteria in terms of the quality of public transport access, parking, and so on. You could look at grants, you could look at the transaction costs. And I also do think, the mover of the motion today was talking about declining business in the post office's core services. It is true, many of us do use many services online that we used to go to the post office for. But where is the post office nationally looking at new business, at basic banking, at new opportunities? Where's that entrepreneurial spirit where you could combine the best of the private sector entrepreneurialism and new technology with the public sector duty, in a sense the government perceived monopoly for services?
For giving me just on that point that she's making, would you agree with me that part of the problem is that not just this but successive governments haven't looked at those issues that she's outlining? They seem to perceive a post office as business of the 90s and the 2000s rather than for the current and future generations.
The honourable member has expressed exactly my feelings about dealing with the post office. It's passive, it's backward-looking, it's old-fashioned. It has an inherent benefit, both in terms of its reputation as a brand and its legal position of governance. So I am told that the post office is, with a new chief exec who has been in post for just 6 months. My understanding is that the post office is soon to release a strategic review about its role. And I am looking forward to hearing positive, forward-looking answers to my concerns, so that my constituency and my town centre is like so many other villages, town centres, suburbs, towns, is served properly by this important government-owned public service. Thank you very much, Mr.